So, after the embarrassment that takes place at Dagon's temple, we read that the people of Ashdod brought together all the rulers of the Philistines and asked them, "What shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel?" Now, notice that they are asking the wrong question already. They should not be asking, "What shall we do with the ark of God?" but "What should we do with the God of the ark? What shall we do with him? How should we respond to him?" Not how do we get rid, but how do we get right with God? Instead, as you know, the Ark of the Covenant is just shoved from place to place, and everywhere it goes, it brings death and destruction to the people. I mean, what a massive own goal from the Philistines. The very worst thing they could do would be to send the ark through their population while remaining in their sin and their rebellion and their defiance against God. Again, verse 9 from back in chapter 5. After they had moved it, the Lord's hand was against that city, throwing it into a great panic. He afflicted the people of the city, both young and old, with an outbreak of tumors. So they sent the ark of God to Ekron. Well, these guys, these Philistines, they are not the sharpest tools in the shed, are they? Right, okay. So the ark of God seems to be directly causing the death of thousands of people here in Gath. What should we do? Oh, let's send it to our friends and family over in Ekron, shall we? I mean, for goodness sake, who needs enemies when you've got friends like these guys, right? Wouldn't you hate to be their relatives and their associates living over in neighbouring Ekron? The irony, of course, is that while they all think God has fallen into their hands, they are in his hands. And it is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. Okay, now into chapter 6. And at the start of the chapter, the Philistines call for the priests and the diviners. Now, this is not the same group that was called upon in chapter 5, the leaders of the Philistines. These guys are the religious leaders. In other words, they ought to have some knowledge or some spiritual insight into what to do. They say, "Why do you harden your hearts as the Egyptians and Pharaoh did? When Israel's God dealt harshly with them, did they not send the Israelites out so they could go on their way?" Now they've heard about the God of Israel, and they take him seriously. They don't say, "Yeah, we've heard the story of the Exodus, and it's probably some kind of an analogy that we don't have to worry too much about." They don't say, "Yeah, we've heard the story of the Exodus, and of course there's no real historical evidence for many of the claims made, so don't worry about it." No, they say, "We've heard, and we believe." Pharaoh brought that judgment down upon himself because he would not get rid of the Israelites. So get rid of them. Get rid of anything that belongs to them. Cast it out, they say. And so the leaders take the advice. They put the ark of God on a cart and they send that cart off, led by 2 cows that have calved and never been yoked. Now, this is important. This is a test from the Philistine leaders who are still not entirely sure that these things haven't just come about by natural circumstances. They don't want to lose this treasure, this prized possession, unnecessarily. So the 2 cows have never been yoked. The assumption is that they will not pull the cart well, if at all, if they've never pulled as a team before. They've also just recently been calved. I don't know if this is true or not, but the idea from the Philistines is that the cow's maternal instincts will keep them from wandering too far away from their calves, from the Philistines' land. In other words, if this cart is actually going to get back from our territory into theirs, it's going to require some kind of miracle from their God. Well, to the surprise of the Philistines, but not to the surprise of the readers, the cows head straight for the road to Beth Shemesh, Israelite territory. Now, it's worth pointing out here that the ark should never have been put on a cart like this. It should never have been dragged around by cows according to God's law. This is a violation. However, the Philistines are obviously ignorant of the intricate details of God's law and the transportation of the ark. And so even though this action violates God's law, it seems that God does not immediately punish them for it. By contrast, though, when the ark does get into Israelite territory, we read that some of the inhabitants of Beth Shemesh looked into the ark of the Lord, and therefore they were struck down dead because of it. I mean, can you believe that? These people, of all people, playing around with the holy things of God. After all that has happened, this whole situation took place because of the misuse of the Ark of the Covenant in the first place, dragging it down into the battlefield when it ought to have remained in the tabernacle. God allowed the Philistines to violate God's law in how they treated the ark in its return because they were ignorant of what they ought to do. But he did not allow the Israelites that same privilege. Why? Because they were not ignorant of it. They either looked into the ark out of defiance, which makes them worthy of death, or ignorance, for which there is no excuse, because God has revealed himself to the Israelites. It's their job to know. It's a reminder to us, I think, that God will hold us accountable for what we have done with the things that have been revealed to us. In Luke's Gospel, we read, "From everyone who has been given much, and spiritually speaking, we have been given much. From everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded. And from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked."